Well, continuing our talk with the Chief Minister, where's the next big thing, or is it you don't want to give your competitors the edge on this?
Yeah, e-gaming is very, very important, and the ICE exhibition is the headline event really of the year for promoting e-gaming, and I understand the Isle of Man got a very good response again at that. But all countries now, as I've said before, are looking for the next big thing. We were very fortunate to be one of the first in on e-gaming. As you say, in 10 years it's gone from not existing at all to now 8% of our GDP and over 700 jobs. So it's been very, very important. But we have to keep looking for the next big thing, and it is getting more and more competitive now with Jersey, Guernsey, even the United Kingdom, all competing over the same opportunities.
It's quite strange to think that 10 years ago it was a big deal. I mean, you had a lot of opposition. Of course, that's gone away mostly because it has worked out. This is probably the thing, isn't it? If you had the crystal ball.
Yeah, but if you look at what we did, we can learn lessons from that. It was a high-risk strategy. There's no question about that. There was a lot of opposition to introducing e-gaming into the island, in many ways from the established financial services industry, because there was always the possibility of reputational damage. But we took a risk, we brought in high quality regulation, that served the Isle of Man very well, and it's formed a very positive and strong foundation for the industry to grow from. The lesson to learn from that, though, is if the Isle of Man is going to capture these new niche opportunities in the future, we've got to be prepared on occasions to take risk as well. And as long as those risks are calculated and we know what the odds are, then I think government has to have a more relaxed approach to this to ensure that we can compete fairly with the other jurisdictions.
I trust, obviously, you'll be thinking in 10 years' time they'll be saying the same thing about Pinewood, but well, you know.
Well, you know, it's easy to be cynical about these things, but we have got to take these chances. The film industry was treated with derision when I first announced it. That goes back as far as 1987 when it was first raised. It has brought in £290 million worth of income directly to Treasury, quite apart from about 100 million which has been spent locally in the economy. It's easy for cynics to criticise and sneer now. They should look at the success and the profile this industry has brought the Isle of Man over the last 15 years. It's been very difficult to get that sort of return on any other investment.
Should we just quickly talk about university fees, and that's obviously a pretty big one. You're expecting this one now to go through. I mean, according to your minister, it's close. He said that.
Yes, there's obviously concerns about it, and no one gets satisfaction out of having to bring in tuition fees or indeed bringing in enhanced public contributions to any of government services. But we are in difficult times, and not only is the Isle of Man government struggling to rebalance its budget, but of course the way universities in the UK charge for students now has changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 years and is likely to change again in the future. So I think we've got to be realistic. We want to bring in a system which is seen to be fair, which will not penalise those on low incomes in particular, which we've gone to great lengths to try and avoid. It does mean that people at the top end of the earnings scale will have to pay a little bit more. That's unfortunate, but we are trying to be fair in all this, and I hope that the system that we bring in at the end, and it will remain to be seen whether we can get the Tynwald vote on it, will be seen to be a genuine attempt to bring in a new structure which is fair to everybody.
What happens if it doesn't go through? Have you got a plan B? Because you've got to get that money in somewhere, I guess.
Yes.
Save that money, rather.
Well, in year 3, if tuition fees went through, it would save us around £4 million. So clearly, if tuition fees don't go through, or a form of tuition fees don't go through, we have to find that money from somewhere else. Now, that might come from education, but education has already suffered some quite substantial reductions in budget over the last few years, so that will be very, very painful if those savings have to come from education. But failing that, it will have to come from the other department expenditures. There is no new money available to replace this loss if it happens.
And what's your view on the MHKs who definitely got elected from a manifesto that said they wouldn't be looking at putting these fees through? Can you understand that they've got a big problem, some of them?
I can understand entirely. It's not very long since we had the election. It's less than 18 months. And it's obviously very painful for some ministers and for backbenchers to have to change their position. But we've got to be realistic. We are living in very, very difficult times fiscally. We have to rebalance the budget, and ministers and members, backbenchers generally, have to take that on board and weigh that up against their previous promises.
So when you saw these manifestos, do you think people were being a bit naive, or were they just going for broke and getting the votes and sorted out afterwards?
People write manifestos from a variety of reasons. I think it's fair to say a lot of the new members in particular wrote their manifestos without necessarily the detailed knowledge of the fiscal problems which face government. You only really learn about these once you get elected, and you can look at it from the inside. So I can fully understand the problems that they have. I can't criticise them for it, but they have to also recognise that once you're in government, life often looks very different to how it does when you're fighting an election for the first time.
Because I mean, obviously people will say a manifesto is their policy, and they are sort of stuck with, if they've said no fees, then it's difficult for them to change their mind, and you've got to persuade them, obviously.
Yes, but also you need to realise that circumstances change generally, whether it's fiscally, economically, and we have to be flexible enough to recognise that and adapt new policies to address those issues as they arise. No one can sit down at the start of an election and say in 5 years' time, this is exactly and precisely the problems we will have to face. Problems are there to be resolved. We can't always anticipate them, and we often have to change our course sometimes to respond to issues which crop up unexpectedly.
Okay. I mean, other things has come up. I mean, I asked you about Benny buses last time, so we've done that. But the road, Appeal Road, 80 odd weeks or something, wasn't it, that they were quoting? What's your views on this? Is this the way the Isle of Man should be perceived? I mean, this is a major, thoroughfare, and it's going to be closed or causing disruption for an awful long time.
Well, it's not going to be closed completely.
No, but one-way systems, I say disruption to businesses, on that road and people's lifestyles.
I think we have to recognise that there has been a long-term demand from the public to improve the state of Peel Road. It's been criticised universally because it's deteriorating. It is a difficult road at times. In particular, it's one of the main routes into Douglas for commuters and also for business people coming over to the island. Now, I know the argument is there, how can you possibly spend all this money on roads at a time when we are having to cut back on other public services? I think first of all we need to recognise that there is a difference between the capital programme and revenue, which the public often fail to. But we cannot put all government expenditure on ice while we rebalance the budget. There will be the work on the Peel Road. We will be starting on the promenade. There is work due to start about the same time on the regeneration of Strand Street and Duke Street. That will be very disruptive, but it will be part of the rebuilding of the infrastructure of Douglas, which will make Douglas, and particularly through that the Isle of Man, a much more attractive place for new investors. The quality of life will improve on the back of it, and hopefully give a stimulus to the economy in the long term because of the improved infrastructure. As you know, I've complained on many, many occasions about the shabby state of Douglas and centre of Douglas in particular, and its damaging effect on the economy. This is a first step now to try and rectify that situation.